Hello, all you beautiful people. This is League on Lock. Eric and Mark with you guys, reaching the summit, the apex, the climax of our LEC Power Rankings. The #1 squad in EU ahead of 2019. They lost an MVP and a top 10 player at the World Championship, and Fnatic still comes in at #1.
Has to be #1 here when you're looking at all these rosters. You're looking at all these teams and you're thinking about how are they going to perform here. You can't put anyone on else at the top here other than the likes of Fnatic.
Only one roster move, and I know it's a doozy because Caps was coveted as the best player in the West for this entire second half of the year. But if you think back to the World Championship specifically, when he had so much hype around him, and a lot of the games he underperformed to that hype level, but guys like Broxa and Reckless and Bwipo stepped up in huge ways. You saw even when Caps was underperforming, Fnatic was still a world-class team, and I expect them to do the same, especially in Europe, with 4/5 of this roster intact that just went to the World Championship Finals. They've got to be the #1 team for EU.
When you remember and look back on the performances that Caps did have at the World Championship, yes, there were some standout performances in the group stage, but when you got to the quarterfinals and the finals, the important stage there, of course, Caps' performances were not up to the level that you would need them to be, or even what you would have expected out of him at these points of his career was not the performances that you would have wanted here. And then, of course, that's not the reason why he's not on this Fnatic roster, but when you look at the type of improvements that can be made here, you can expect a ton out of this team because you know that the players and the reasons and the way that they got to where they were are some of the strengths from these guys like Bwipo, like Broxa, and of course like Reckless helping them get there.
And if you think, they were discouraged after that World Championship loss and, back-to-back LCS titles, what better way to rejuvenate a team than have one of your star players, the guy you built from the ground up, say, you know what, I think we capped out. I think we can do I can do better on this other squad. They're not going to say it's an insult, but you've got to take that as an insult if you're the 4 other members on Fnatic and you want to just prove that Caps was wrong and completely destroy them. So these guys are going to be fired up, not just when they play G2, but the entire spring split. And Broxa, the level that he reached at Worlds, if he comes back into EU at that level, no one's even close to him in Europe.
Yeah, and that is an unbelievably exciting thing that's going to be going on for Fnatic fans, is the likes of Broxa and how he's going to be performing this split. Because, hey, this is Broxa's world here right now in the LEC, as it is totally open in this jungle position for him to be the top dog. There are some great other junglers here, Maxilor, Mowgli coming over here that I expect to make their impact here in the LEC, but you can't start talking about the junglers here in this region, and you can't be thinking about strong performances from these junglers without talking about the likes of Broxa, because he is absolutely the top dog.
And he gave it to Ning a few times in the tiebreaker. Obviously, in the World Finals, Ning kind of gave it to him 3 games in a row, but that was a whole team thing. Fnatic did not really show up in that grand final matchup. Brox is going to have his way in Europe, and there shouldn't be nearly as big of meta issues. Reckless will be playing all these games because they don't have the luxury to be subbing out Bwipo and Soaz. So Reckless getting that routine back and playing some of these meta AD carries, because even right now, whatever they're adding in 9.1, come 9.2, ADCs are going to be very strong again, and Reckless and Hylissang already played together for a year. So Broxa and Reckless, the key guys for Fnatic, and another guy who I feel like we haven't talked about much in the offseason, who's going to get all the starts in the top lane now, is Bwipo. Fnatic clearly deciding we're going with the younger guy in the top lane. Soaz wants a starting spot, fair enough, over to Misfits, but they decide to keep Bwipo, and right behind Broxa, he was probably the best performer on Fnatic at Worlds.
When you looked at that situation with Soaz and Bwipo in the top side for Fnatic, you had to look at it last year and notice that Bwipo's performances with the team, the way everything just worked together, was a better fit overall than the likes of Soaz at that point in time. And when you think about his performance, though, Soaz certainly still has more to provide and more to give in a starting role. But when you're looking here as Fnatic and you had to make a decision, apple or oranges, who is going to give us the better performances, Bwipo is the right call to make here, because Bwipo showed you that potential last year, and you know that no matter what he takes up there in that top side, you're going to be getting a solid, stable performance coming from him.
Yeah, and the main thing with him in SOAS was you want tanks, you play SOAS. You want carries, you play Bwipo. But how good was Bwipo's Ornn throughout all of 2018? And you remember when he made his debut way back in the spring split, he played 3 Scion games in a row, and people were, okay, pump the brakes, you know. It's 3 games. He played Scion every time. It's not that impressive. But he was popping off on the carries at Worlds as well. Jace, Victor top. He was one of the first guys to bust that out and completely embarrass C9. So he can play pretty much anything, as we saw in the bottom lane too.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Victor is not going away anytime soon right now. It looks, whether you like it or hate it, he's here to stay, it seems. And so that is a good little champion that Bwipo can always call upon, of course. But his performance in that top side is going to be vital for the success of Fnatic this year. And there's no reason not to expect that he will be bringing back some of these star performances that he had early in the rookie season. And he will be more seasoned as a veteran now, ready to go.
And there's going to be more expectations and responsibility that will probably fall on his shoulders with the likes of Nemesis coming in as a rookie who we still not entirely sure how well he'll perform. Yes, he's not going to draw as much pressure or be as aggressive, as good as Capped, because Fnatic groomed him and helped him grow for 2+ years on that roster. So no, Nemesis is not going to reach those expectations immediately, which means the heavy lifting will go to the likes of Bwipo and, again, on Reckless, who, by the way, is he used to carrying games for Fnatic? Obviously not. That's been his entire career. But Nemesis, I don't think there's nearly as much pressure as people are expecting. Obviously, you're on the most storied franchise in Europe, and the expectations are to win an LCS split. But you already saw in interviews, he wants to win everything. MSI, Worlds, yes, he's already got a meme for himself.
He's got the aspirations set exactly where they want to be, shooting for the stars. But if you're looking at the performances of what you're going to be getting here, and even if you're worried about the performance that you might be getting from the likes of Nemesis, and if he might be feeding or things like that, you don't have to look too far. And I know it is only one type of game situation example, but look back to Worlds, look back at the series against EDG, and think back to the game where Caps was something like 0-4 starting out on the Yasuo there, and the team,
the Yasuo effect,
and the team still finds a way to dig around that type of hole in the lineup and find a way to get that victory here. So even if you're thinking Nemesis is going to come in here and not bring the performances that everybody, including ourselves, are telling you that Nemesis will eventually be able to give you as the starting player for Fnatic, get ready for the rest of the team to carry on.
Even without Caps, Fnatic comes in at number 1 on our power rankings. That's it today for League Unlocked. Thank you guys so much for watching.